There is a woman right now, maybe someone you know, who is sitting alone, wondering what she did wrong. She is replaying every conversation in her head, searching for the moment things shifted. She is warm, she is perceptive, she is fiercely loyal, and she has a depth of emotional intelligence that most people will never encounter in a lifetime of relationships. And she is alone. Not because she is broken, not because she asked for too much, but because the men who found her were terrified of exactly what made her extraordinary. This is not a story about bad men. This is a story about a psychological phenomenon that is playing out in millions of relationships right now, and almost nobody is talking about the real reason it happens. In the next few minutes, you are going to understand something about human behavior that most therapists won't tell you and most self-help books completely miss.
You are going to understand why emotionally intelligent women, the ones with the deepest capacity for love, are the most frequently abandoned. And you are going to understand what is actually happening inside the mind of a man when he encounters a woman like this. I am going to give you the science, the psychology, and the raw, unfiltered truth. Stay with me, because the last thing I share with you is going to completely change how you see every relationship you have ever been in. Let's start with something called nervous system dysregulation. This is not a buzzword. This is a measurable biological response that happens in the human body when it encounters something unfamiliar at an emotional level. Here's what that means in plain language. Most men, not all, but most, grew up in environments where emotional depth was either mocked, punished, or completely absent. They learned very early that showing vulnerability was a liability, that feelings were a weakness,
that being emotionally contained was how you survived. Over years and years of that conditioning, their nervous system built a very specific baseline, a kind of emotional comfort zone that is narrow and guarded. Now take that man and place him in front of a woman who feels everything at a volume of 10. A woman who doesn't just hear what you say, but reads the micro-expressions on your face, the tension in your shoulders, the slight change in your tone of voice. A woman whose emotional radar is so finely tuned that she notices you're off before you've even registered it yourself. His nervous system doesn't experience this as love, it experiences it as threat. Because in his body, being fully seen has always come with consequences. And here is where the entire dynamic breaks down in a way that is heartbreaking for both people involved. She reads his pulling away as rejection. He is pulling away because her presence is activating something in him that he has no language for and no tools to process. She gets more attuned, more connected, more emotionally present because that is her instinct when someone she loves is in pain. He retreats further because her increasing emotional presence is amplifying the very thing that overwhelmed him in the first place. This cycle. This specific, identifiable, predictable cycle. This is the reason. Not her intensity, not his heartlessness. A mismatch of nervous system baselines that neither person was ever taught to understand. Let me give you the first real insight. Psychologists call it emotional tolerance capacity. Every person has one. It is the range of emotional intensity they can experience and remain present for without shutting down or fleeing. And here is the critical part. It is not fixed. It is built over time through exposure, through safety, and through practice. Most men have a very low emotional tolerance capacity. Not because they are weak, because they were never given the opportunity to build it. A woman with high emotional intelligence is not doing anything wrong when she brings her full self into a relationship. She is simply operating at a frequency that his internal system has never been trained to receive. And rather than admitting that, because that admission would require a level of self-awareness he has never been pushed toward, he does what every nervous system does when it is overwhelmed. It finds the exit. And he will not call it fear. He will call it moving too fast. He will call it too intense. He will say she is too much. And every single one of those labels is a translation error. What he is actually saying is this: I do not have the internal architecture to hold what you are offering me. But no one has ever taught him that language. So instead, she carries the weight of labels that were never hers to bear. Now, here is where this gets even more layered. Because it is not just about emotional tolerance. There is a second mechanism at work, and it is one of the most powerful and least understood dynamics in all of human relationships. It is called the exposure effect of authenticity. Here's what that means. Most people, especially in early relationships, present a curated version of themselves, a highlight reel. They manage impressions, soften edges, conceal insecurities. And this is so universal that most people don't even realize they're doing it. It's social survival. It's normal. But a woman with deep emotional intelligence cannot sustain that performance. Not because she lacks self-control, but because her nervous system is allergic to inauthenticity. She senses the gap between the mask and the person behind it, and she gently, consistently, lovingly reaches past the mask. She will ask the question that cuts straight to the wound. She will sit in silence with you until you say the real thing. She will hold space for the version of you that you have spent years hiding. And for a man who has built his entire identity on the curated version, on being strong, on being certain, on being in control, this is not intimacy. This is excavation, and it feels like danger. There is a moment in these relationships, and if this has ever happened to you, you will know exactly what I mean, where a man looks at a woman like this and feels a flash of something he cannot name. It is not love, although that might be part of it. It is the sensation of being seen past the point where he thinks he ends. She is looking at something in him that he has never shown anyone, something he is not even sure he wants to look at himself. And in that moment, he has two choices. He can lean into it, which requires a kind of courage most men have never had to develop, or he can leave. And leaving is so much easier when you have a list of convincing reasons. Too intense, too much, too fast, moving on. The tragedy is not just that he loses her. The tragedy is that the thing she was looking at, that part of him she could see with such clarity, that was the best version of him, and it just walked out of the room with her. Let's talk about something called the pursuit-withdrawal pattern, because this is where a lot of people watching right now are going to recognize their entire relationship history. Research in attachment theory, and we're talking decades of clinical studies here, consistently shows that emotionally avoidant individuals become more withdrawn the more emotionally present their partner becomes. This is counterintuitive. You would think that consistent warmth and attentiveness would make someone feel safer and more willing to connect. But for someone with a dismissive or fearful attachment style, the opposite happens. The more warmth they receive, the more their system interprets that warmth as a signal that something is about to be required of them that they cannot deliver. So they pull back, not to hurt you, to survive. And here is the devastating thing for the emotionally intelligent woman in this dynamic. She is watching him pull away. Her instinct, which is wired by empathy, by sensitivity, by a genuine desire to understand, her instinct is to close the gap, to reach out more, to be more present, to ask what's wrong, to offer more connection. Every single one of those impulses is an act of love, and every single one of them, to his overwhelmed nervous system, reads as pressure, as pursuit, as confirmation that there is an emotional demand coming that he does not know how to meet. She runs toward, he runs away. Not because love is absent, but because their systems are speaking completely different languages and there is no translator in the room. Here is the thing that women in this position need to hear, and this is the part that nobody says out loud. His leaving is not a verdict on your worth. It is a report on his readiness. Those are two completely different things, and they have been confused for each other in your head for far too long. His inability to hold the depth of what you are offering is not evidence that your depth is wrong. It is evidence that he has not yet done the work required to be someone capable of receiving it. And that work, that emotional development, is not something you can do for him. No matter how much you love him, no matter how patient you are, no matter how long you stay. You cannot carry someone into their own growth. You can only create the conditions for it, and then respect yourself enough to require it. Now let's go deeper, because there is a third mechanism here that is almost never discussed, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It is called the mirror function of close relationships. The psychological research on this is extraordinary. Studies show that intimate relationships function as external representations of our internal state. In plain language, the people we get closest to become reflections of the parts of ourselves we most need to confront. This is why falling in love feels both like the most wonderful and most terrifying thing a human being can experience. It is wonderful because you are finally being met. It is terrifying because you are finally being seen. A woman with high emotional intelligence amplifies this effect dramatically. Because she is not only reflecting his surface behaviors back at him, The forgetting to call, the deflecting with humor, the slight cruelty when he's scared. She is also reflecting his patterns, his defenses, his unprocessed grief. The way he treats her when things get hard maps exactly onto how he treats himself when he is alone. And she sees all of it. She sees it before he sees it. She sees it with compassion, which is somehow more unbearable than judgment would be. Because judgment he knows how to fight. Compassion just leaves him standing there with no defense. A man who is not ready for that level of self-confrontation will not thank her for the mirror. He will smash it. And he will tell himself, and her, that the problem was the reflection, not the thing being reflected. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called emotional debt. Here's how it works. Every time a person suppresses an emotional response, doesn't grieve a loss, doesn't address a conflict, doesn't process a fear, that emotion doesn't disappear. It is stored. In the body, in patterns of behavior, in the reflexive responses that seem to come from nowhere. Over years, the accumulated emotional debt becomes enormous. Most men walk around carrying an internal weight they cannot name, cannot locate, and cannot put down. They just know that certain situations make them want to run. Certain conversations make them cold. Certain levels of closeness make them feel like they are suffocating. And then they meet her. And she is the first person in their lives who is actually willing to sit with all of that with them. Who isn't afraid of it. Who doesn't need them to have it together before she will love them. And that, which should feel like the most profound relief, instead feels like the most acute danger. Because accepting her presence means accepting that the debt exists. It means turning towards something they have spent years running from. And the weight of it, the sheer accumulated weight of all that unexpressed, unprocessed, unfelt experience, can feel completely insurmountable. So he leaves. And he will spend years afterward in relationships that never quite get deep enough to make him feel anything. Safe relationships, comfortable relationships. Relationships where no one asks the real questions, and he will call this peace. But he will know, in the 3 a.m. moments when the quiet gets too loud, he will know that it is not peace. It is numbness. And there is a difference. Here is the part that might be the hardest to hear, and I want you to really sit with this. The emotionally intelligent woman is not just losing these relationships because of his limitations. She is also losing them because of one of her own patterns. It is called hypervigilant compassion. Because she feels everything, because she can read a room and read a person with extraordinary accuracy, she often knows, she genuinely knows, that a man is struggling before he does. She can see his pain, his fear, his unreadiness. And because she has a heart that is built for connection, she stays. She tries to help. She adjusts herself. She softens her edges, quiets her needs, makes herself smaller to give him room to grow. And in doing so, she teaches him, without intending to, that her needs are negotiable, that she will always accommodate, that she will always give more than she receives. This is the trap. Not because she is weak, but because her greatest strength, her capacity for empathy, can become the very thing that keeps her locked in situations that are quietly draining her. The most important thing a woman like this can ever learn is this: the depth of your love is not measured by how much you are willing to endure. It is measured by how clearly you require to be met. Setting that boundary, holding that standard, does not make you less loving. It makes you the kind of woman that only a man with genuine emotional development can access. It filters for him. It creates the conditions for the right person to find you, rather than spending years trying to grow the wrong person into someone who can. Let me leave you with this, because this is the thing I want you to carry with you long after this video ends. There is a version of this story where she stops waiting, where she stops explaining herself to people who are not yet equipped to understand her, where she stops translating her depth into something easier to digest, where she simply stands fully in who she is, with all the intensity, all the perception, all the emotional truth, and waits for the person who doesn't need her to shrink. That version of the story exists. It is not a fantasy. It is the result of one decision made over and over again. The decision to stop treating your capacity for love as a problem that needs to be managed, and to start treating it as a standard that must be matched. The right man will not be terrified of the mirror. He will pick it up. He will look into it. And he will say, "Finally, someone who sees what I have been trying to see in myself." That man exists. But you will never find him while you are busy trying to fix the ones who keep breaking the glass.